Go get Todd. It's 5 minutes. She had too much of that. Guess we're gonna go. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, 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 yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. It's great to have you today. My nose is itching, sorry. No, I can't. Where'd you go? Great to have all of you. Always like to begin our services by embracing all that you bring with you to our space, all of your uniqueness, your unique belief, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, all of those things that make you who you are welcome here this morning. And this includes those, again, who hear me say this every Sunday, as well as those who might be hearing it for the first time. You're equally as welcome and embraced. And it, of course, includes those who are streaming with us this morning as well. We're always glad to know that you're with us, too. So welcome to one and all. Before we take a couple of moments to greet one another, I do want to point out that our unity candle is lit here at the front of our sanctuary. For those who are members or regulars here, you know this is something we light whenever we have lost a member. And this past week, for those who recall Joyce Powell, a longtime friend and member of this congregation, she's not been able to come for quite some time, but she was just a lovely lady who loved being here, was often here many hours during the week volunteering and participating in programs, and was just a kind, beautiful person to be around. So I've missed having her here for some time, and we're going to be missing her permanently at this point, but want to definitely take a moment to remember her, as well as to extend our sympathies to her daughter and the rest of her family. So let's just, if you will, take a moment of silence on behalf of Joyce. Thank you. And yes, please do take a few moments to greet one another. As always, say hello to those that you look forward to seeing each Sunday. Say hello to those you don't look forward to seeing each Sunday. No, that didn't come out right. And if you are joining us for the first time, please don't be shy, because we're a very friendly bunch, and we're also elated that you're here. Again, because we've got limited time, so
maybe it's too long.
It might be. Yeah. We can just forego it today.
That's okay. It's up to you. Everything is up to you.
Thank you.
You're the boss.
Thank you. Proper script from David or something, so you have the...
Well, if I get my computer, I just money. I paid $300, but I needed to pay $500. Yes, I had to pay $500. Keep looking for jobs. A lot of people hire another person.
Right. No, I'll hit it. You can go prepare for the... Right. All right, thank you so much. And as always, there will be more opportunity to visit with one another during our social hour immediately following our service. So I invite everyone to stay for that. But we do want to move forward with our service now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and my favorite part, cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
The opening reflection today is by Kathleen McTeague. We come together this morning to remind one another, to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's spaces and see their communication and their reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our present together. Have a good day.
Hymn that's a favorite of mine, and I know of many of yours, Gather the Spirit. You are welcome, of course, to read the words up here, or if you are unfamiliar with the music and would like to see it, if it's in your hymnal, number 347, please stand as you're willing and able and sing with gusto. Gather the Spirit, our vestal power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love when conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit, growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
Good morning. I have a story for all ages. If any children would like to come up and sit here, you can see the pictures really well. Hi. Oh, here comes some more. Great. The story today is by Sean Tan, and it's called The Red Tree. And it's a short story, so I'm going to read the introduction to the book because I think it really relates very well to what Reverend Todd's going to talk about today. It talks about worries and hopes, and I'd like you to get the perspective of this introduction. So, The Red Tree. When a child awakens with dark leaves drifting into her bedroom, she feels that sometimes the day begins with nothing to look forward to, and things go from bad to worse. Feelings too complex for words are rendered into an imaginary landscape where the child wanders, oblivious to the glimmer of promise in the shape of a tiny red leaf. Everything seems hopeless until the child returns to her room and sees the red tree. At that perfect moment of beauty and purity, the child smiles and her world stirs anew. With sensitivity and wonder, the evocative images in the red tree open a window to our inexplicable emotions and tell a story about the power of hope, renewal, and inspiration. The red tree. So here's our main character right there, this little girl. Sometimes the day begins with nothing to look forward to, and things go from bad to worse. Darkness overcomes you. Nobody understands. The world is a deaf machine without sense or reason. Sometimes you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, but nothing ever happens. Then all your troubles come at once. Wonderful things are passing you by. Terrible fates are inevitable. Sometimes you just don't know what you are supposed to do. Or who you are meant to be. Or where you are. And the day seems to end the way it began. But suddenly, there is, right in front of you, bright and vivid, quietly waiting. What do you see? Just as you imagined it would be, the red tree, to bring us hope. Thank you. We can now sing our children out.
It's now time for our offertory. We now give and receive this morning, offering which sustains this community and our mission to the larger world. And they'll be with you soon.
We'll now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning, and do want to begin with a candle of sympathy for Rochelle Strothers and her daughter Sophia, and of course her aunt Pat Warpenberg, whose brother, uncle, nephew, respectively, Rory, passed away this week after dealing with a long illness. So we've been with the family on this journey for quite some time, kindling candles, and Pat, we're holding you and Rochelle and Sophia and the whole family in our hearts at this time. Also want to kindle a candle for Evan Armstrong. Got a text at 10:30 this morning in between services letting me know that Evan he's actually been experiencing a shortness of breath off and on for a few weeks now, and they've not been able to figure out what's causing that. So Evan asked for us to keep him in our thoughts as well this morning. So let's take a moment of silence now on behalf of others we might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we are going to move right into our reading today, and I'm going to invite you to participate in a responsive reading, number 651, in the back of the gray hymnal, 651. Hopefully there are enough out there. Please share with a neighbor if necessary. Now, I'll try to explain this just a little bit better than I did the first service. So we'll try to, we'll have, let's say, this side of the room will begin, and this side can be our respondents, and we'll close on the last verse together. You got that part, right? Okay, now you'll notice that in the first and last sentence of this reading, it talks about 4 billion cells. There's really now 7 billion, more than 7 billion. This is about the human population. So when you get to that number 4, if you'll just say 7, okay? It sounded like 47 with the mix-up the first. And also notice that the first portion is actually in 2 sections. So this group won't start reading until the italicized sentences, and this group won't stop reading until it tells you how it went first service, okay? Maestro? I am a single cell .
Order and harmony Though the sounds be strained and thin, let the voice inside me rise, and the strength be beckoned in, for these words within ring more clearly on the outside. They resound beyond the hillside. I am worthy, I am safe. In this life, though my fingers try and fail, let me breathe through hollow wood. Living reed, let sound prevail, for this whistler's tune shatters emptiness with sweetness, filling in the gap between us. You are worthy, you are safe. In this life, I am but one of a million starving others, robbed of everything but hunger. We are prisoners together, I am one, but one of many single voices in the silence that refuse the lies that bind us. We are worthy, we are safe. May the grace inside my limbs stay the stillness that defends me, for each move I make brings me closer to the dancer. I am healing from my terror. I am worthy, I am safe. In this life I am but one of a million starving others, robbed of everything but hunger. We are prisoners together, I am one, but one of many single voices in the silence that refuse the lies that bind us. We are worthy, we are safe. In this life, though the sounds be strained and thin, let the voice inside me rise, and the strength be beckoned in, for these words within ring more clearly on the outside. They resound beyond the hillside. I am worthy, I am safe. In this life, I am but one of a million starving others, robbed of everything but hunger. We are prisoners together, I am one, but one of many single voices in the silence that refuse the lies that bind us. I refuse the lies that bind us. Please refuse the lies that bind us. We are worthy, we are safe.
Beautiful. The best of times, the worst of times. The title of my sermon today is not meant to suggest that how we cope with today's realities is only a matter of perspective, that it's a cup half full, cup half empty matter of opinion. Today, there are some very negative and some very positive things happening, and it's easy to lose sight of one if we're only focusing on the other. If we just see the negative, we can become angry, overwhelmed, lose hope, and give up. If we just see the positive, we are in denial, maybe delusional, certainly irresponsible. If we just see the positive, we're part of the problem. If we just see the negative, we have no reason to be part of the solution. To change our world for the better, we must first believe that better is possible. And to believe that better is possible, we need hope. And to have hope, we need to recognize the good things happening. So let's begin with a via negativa. Let us dare the dark, as theologian Matthew Fox says, and enter that alchemical cauldron where it becomes possible for the dark, chaotic, hellish contents to be transformed into something nourishing. For today, our entire planet is experiencing a dark night of the soul, the worst of which stems from the rise of authoritarian regimes around the world, global inequality, and of course, global warming. According to an article in the Chicago Tribune earlier this year, based on the research from the Human Rights Foundation, the citizens of 94 countries suffer under non-democratic regimes, meaning that 3.97 billion people are currently controlled by tyrants, absolute monarchs, military juntas, or competitive authoritarians. That's 53% of the world's population. Statistically, then, authoritarianism is one of the largest, if not the largest, challenges facing humanity. The op-ed written by Gary Kasparov and Thor Halvorsen, one of whom was respectively beaten, blacklisted, and exiled by the Kremlin, the other, who witnessed his mother shot by Venezuelan security forces, go on to point out that the two authoritarian dictators ruling their countries, Putin and Maduro, have co-conspirators in all parts of the world, fellow would-be tyrants who are dismantling the free press, jailing opponents, manipulating elections, and committing a host of human rights violations. We don't have time to mention all the authoritarian leaders now in charge of more than half the world, but you know the key players. Turkish President Erdogan, who has closed media outlets, thousands of schools, fired more than 120,000 government workers, and locked up nearly 50,000 he's accused of conspiring against him. Kim Jong-un, whose totalitarian government publicly executes North Korean citizens on a whim, imprisons thousands in government concentration camps, intentionally starves others to death, and enjoys threatening the world with his growing nuclear weapons capabilities. Russia's Vladimir Putin has worked to crush any dissent in his own country, recently used his military to take over another, Crimea, and apparently doesn't mind interfering with the free elections in other countries, including our own. Philippine President Duterte, in addition to competing with Donald Trump for position as most vulgar authoritarian ever, has during just 1 year in office been responsible for the extrajudicial murders of thousands of citizens in his unrelenting drug war, proudly likened himself to Hitler by promising to kill 3 million more, has encouraged his soldiers to rape women, has bragged about personally murdering suspected criminals. Oh, yes, and has been welcomed into the White House and told he's doing a great job. There are other authoritarian leaders just as notorious as these, but most have stayed out of the limelight, and are even more are normalized as legitimate leaders on the world stage, like Chinese President Xi, King Assad of Saudi Arabia, and until recent years, even Bashar al-Assad of Syria, even though their countries have some of the worst human rights violations on earth. And of course, here in our own country, we've somehow managed to install a president who, during his first months in office, dropped the most powerful bomb since Hiroshima and Nagasaki on a whim. And just this week, encouraged our nation's police to treat suspects with brutality. And threatens to fire, or does fire, anybody who gets in his way. Worse than his behavior, however, is that the GOP lawmakers in charge refuse to even investigate his unconstitutional use of his position for his own personal financial gain and his possible collusion with the Russians to steal the election. When the lawmakers themselves won't enforce the law, when doing so threatens their own positions of power, including refusing to hold hearings for a president's Supreme Court nominee for more than a year, then changing the rules overnight to install their own, we are living under an authoritarian regime. A regime that feels it is above the law and can make up the rules as it goes along. Today, many forms of inequality seem just as overwhelming. The most recent United Nations data, which includes all 196 countries and territories in the world, indicates, though some are doing better than others, there is no place on earth where women are treated equally to or are better off than men. The latest Gender Inequality Index, the GII, measuring the richness of human life rather than the richness of the economy, suggests women around the world are behind in the areas of lifespan, education, income, political participation, equal rights, security, and living in a healthy environment. Although the U.S. ranks number 10 out of nearly 200 countries, and its GII has been very slowly moving upward since 1990, in recent years, our partisan Supreme Court has ruled it's legal for corporations to decide what health coverage is appropriate for women to have, and that it's okay not to include contraception if it goes against the religious sentiments of their owners. Although more millennial women in our country today have college degrees than men do, they still have higher poverty rates. And by the time the average working woman is age 59 or reaches 59, she will have earned more than $800,000 less than the average man. All according to the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Although different nations have historically used different excuses to justify discriminating against certain segments of their populations, including gender, as well as caste, class, and religion, it has long been race here in the U.S. And today, more than 50 years past the civil rights movement, as sociologist Eduardo Bonilla Silva says, blacks and most racial minorities lag behind whites in terms of income, wealth, occupational and health status, educational attainment, and other relevant social indicators. In recent years, thanks to the advent of the cell phone cameras and dash cameras, we've begun to witness the sort of deadly encounters between the police and unarmed black men that has been systemic for generations. not just the occasional missteps of a few bad apples. So that myth's not going to fly here. Just this week, we learned the Baltimore Police Department is now preparing to dismiss perhaps as many as 55 cases after video evidence was released showing police officers planting drugs in suspects' vehicles. And the NAACP just issued its first ever travel advisory, warning minorities to use extreme caution while traveling through Missouri after its governor signed what it's calling a new Jim Crow law that makes it more difficult for victims of bias to prove they've been discriminated against. Also this week, a leaked document revealed that Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Justice Department intends to sue some colleges and universities for using affirmative action. And even as Trump himself announced support for a bill that would cut the number of legal immigrants allowed into this country by half, allowing only English speakers with advanced degrees and proven work skills. And given his recent announcement about banning transgender members from the military, it's clear discrimination against the GBLTQ community continues in our nation at the highest level. Then, of course, there's income inequality. Just a few weeks ago, it was widely reported that now 5 men, last year it was 6, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Amancio Ortega, and Carlos Slim, who together are worth more than $400 billion, have more wealth than half the people on earth. To comprehend what a billion looks like, I always like to point out that 1 billion seconds ago, Ronald Reagan was still president. Such economic disparity can no longer allow anyone to reasonably conclude that global capitalism is democratic or just. Here in the U.S., the bottom 90%, 90 out of 100 people, earn an average of $34,000 a year, while the top 1% earn almost $1.4 million, and the top 0.1% earn close to $7 million a year. The average worker with a 401k, if they're lucky enough to have a 401 retirement plan, currently has a balance of about $18,000. How far is that going to get them in retirement compared to the top 100 CEOs in the country with more than $14.7 billion set aside to live out their golden years? During the past billion seconds, give or take a few 100 million seconds, the wages of the top 1% has grown 293%, almost tripled, while the wages for the bottom 90 out of 100 people, almost everyone in the country, has remained the same since 1979. Our final descent into the abyss of our anxiety and despair brings us to what may be the worst threat to our existence that humanity has ever known: global warming. According to the NASA website, which for some reason Trump hasn't interfered with like he has the Energy Department, 16 of the hottest years on record have all occurred since, guess when? 2001. Figure that out. 25 days ago, NASA also reported warm weather events in both the Arctic and Antarctic are happening more often and lasting longer. And 4 months ago, the agency reported the extent of sea ice in both the Arctic and Antarctic reached another record-breaking low, almost 800,000 fewer square miles than in 2010, the equivalent of having lost a chunk of sea ice larger than Mexico. 2 weeks ago, as you probably heard, an ice shelf 3 times the size of London with twice as much volume as Lake Erie, broke free of Antarctica. As of mid-July, California has had more than 3,200 fires burn over 113,000 acres. Death Valley reached 127 degrees, just 7 degrees short of the hottest temperatures ever recorded on Earth. This past week, several heat records were broken from Oregon to Seattle and would have been broken here in Spokane too if it weren't for the smoke keeping the temperatures down. Aren't we lucky? Melting glaciers also mean the oceans are both warming and acidifying, bleaching the coral reefs, and already causing sea levels to rise near coastal cities everywhere, as well as leading to extreme weather events for us all. So that's the bad news. I didn't know, should I start with the bad news or the good news? I thought I'd start with the bad news, and that's the overwhelming part. That's the part that makes us sick and feel we might as well just give up. But that's not why we're considering all this today, to stay in that gloom, but to realize reality. You know I always use my words carefully, right? To realize reality. To feel the urgency. To commit to doing our part to making our world more just and sustainable. But again, to make such a commitment, we first need to feel confident that what we do can actually make a difference. That what we do can bring an end to tyranny everywhere. Finally bring an end to racial inequality in our own nation and inequality everywhere. And to combat, even begin to reverse global warming. So to begin, last week I made the case that communities of the world, the less than 200 countries and territories, down from untold tens of thousands centuries ago, are inevitably moving toward one world community. In doing so, I outlined several reasons I believe this is so. Firstly, historians tell us that the age of nations is a relatively recent and modern phenomenon that may end and become obsolete. Secondly, scholars generally agree that nations emerge in response to perceived threats from outsiders, but as the people of all nations increase their interactions through the World Wide Web and other communications technologies, developing a global culture in the process, which is happening, and have no choice but to share one economy, care for one environment, strengthen one set of international laws, the demands for global equality and justice and human rights must follow. Thirdly, historians like Yuval Harari and philosophers like Peter Singer, among others, say this inevitability is already happening. That, as Harari says, it's crystal clear that history is moving relentlessly towards unity. Now, this doesn't mean an end of nations any more than becoming one country meant an end of states in the U.S., or the formation of the European Union meant an end to individual nations there. What it does mean is that our global community, of which we are all citizens, whether we want to recognize it or not, will increasingly erect new structures, more powerful structures, to help organize and govern our supranational existence. And I personally don't believe our supranational community is a coming reality, but it already exists, though our old paradigm hasn't yet caught up with this new reality. So we still don't use the appropriate terms to define what's happening. We still use the old language, the old nationalistic language. The rise of authoritarian regimes, furthermore, the desire of many to bail out of the European Union, or of voters in the Philippines electing a despot whom promised them to cut all ties with the U.S., and voters here in the U.S. electing an authoritarian bully like Trump who promised to put America's interests first in our world and to build a wall to keep out the criminals and the rapists, reflect an intuitive, fear-based reaction to what we all sense is already happening, that the people of the earth are becoming one, blurring the lines between our imaginary borders. For me, at least, this new and inevitable reality is a reason for hope. For when as individuals we're able to transcend national identity toward a larger identity as members of a global community, a global human community, when we see ourselves as one humanity, we will have no further need of tyrants to protect us from outsiders because there won't be any outsiders. It won't end all conflict, but hopefully identifying as one global community, as one people, will at least keep us from dropping bombs on each other, the same way being a national community keeps us from dropping bombs on other states, at least since 1865. Perhaps we've even seen a bit of a shift just this week here in our own country when Republicans finally began curtailing Trump's authoritarian abuses by both passing sanctions against Russia for interfering with our election and putting procedures in place to prevent him from firing the Attorney General or Special Counsel Robert Mueller while legislators are away. And if that doesn't give you hope, just think about that. Both the House and Senate will be on break for the next 33 days. That's more than a month that they can't make any terrible decisions. More importantly, they leave without having been able to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Or accomplish much else for that matter, which, in my opinion, with this lot, is probably a good thing. They've even agreed to come together with Democrats to begin working to improve some of the problems with the Affordable Care Act rather than continuing on with their attempts to get rid of it. Obviously, we still have far to go if we're ever going to achieve social and economic equality for all. So I won't offend the marginalized among us by attempting to sugarcoat the reality that we're still in. Surely there has been some progress over the decades in the areas of equal rights for women, racial equality, and gay rights, but it hasn't been nearly enough. Not in our own nation or in our global community, even as the issue of income equality or inequality has worsened, almost exponentially. My hope that we shall finally surmount these miseries, however, lies also in my belief that we are becoming one community. When governments can no longer exploit our natural fear of strangers and of strange ways to rally the troops against our own neighbors, or to discriminate against those who are different in order to uphold the status quo, because we have finally come to see ourselves as earthlings, as Gaians, instead of as Americans or Russians or Chinese or Africans or Arabs and so forth, then we will celebrate our differences, not fear them. It hasn't always ended well, and there's been an authoritarian backlash, but in recent years, millions involved in global events like the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement is evidence that what I'm saying is true. That when we are exposed to each other, we realize a more egalitarian society is possible and must be possible, and we must take action to make it happen. Last November, while ill-gotten means led to the election of Trump, Washington state voters were among the latest to overwhelmingly pass an initiative requiring our state legislators to support a national constitutional amendment to get big money out of politics. By reserving constitutional rights for people, not corporations. More recently, try as they might with all the power to do so on their side, GOP leaders were again unable to repeal Obamacare because, flawed as it might be, it is more than a step in the right direction, a step toward equality and justice, and it is not possible for us to go backward. And now, for the first time, rather than taking or talking incremental steps, the Democrats are increasingly talking about making single-payer health care part of their platform. And let's not forget that earlier this week, Senator Cory Booker called for the nationwide legalization of marijuana. You can applaud that, yeah. You need to applaud that, whether you enjoy the stuff or not. Because the drug war, it is the drug war that has been the longest, costliest, deadliest, most destructive war in our history, and has been the primary mechanism in support of the new Jim Crow era. The era of mass incarceration that has militarized our local police forces and led to a racist criminal justice system that grossly condemns people of color in their communities, condemning them to be second-class citizens through poverty, unemployment, political disenfranchisement, and all other kinds of racism. Yet a report out early this month shows that states like ours, where cannabis has already become legal. Did you guys hear this? Wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear this. In states like ours where cannabis has become legal, the number of traffic searches by police and highway patrol has plummeted to nearly half of what it was. Maybe we're finally realizing ending racism isn't about changing racist views. It's about changing racist systems. Finally, the area that may concern us most is also the area where there is most reason for hope regarding global warming. As threatening as the impacts of climate change have already become, we are making unexpected, rapid, and encouraging changes. For instance, when Trump announced that he was going to pull out of what was already a minimalist response to climate change by the rest of the world got serious about it, got serious about the Paris Climate Agreement. Equally as important, cities all over the U.S., including our own, are defying Trump by pledging to abide by the agreement anyway, as are some key states, including California and New York. With consumer markets so large, it will force companies and industries, including car manufacturers, to meet their greener standards. And just a few days ago, India, one of the largest consumer markets in the world, announced it will transition to nothing but electric cars during the next 13 years. Together, these large population centers will require the entire automobile industry to make that same switch. Even more exciting than all of this is the rapid progress we're making with renewable energy. If you haven't heard, during the past decade, green energy use in California has grown from less than 1% to nearly 15%. In one day this past spring, green energy accounted for 40% of use in California. In Arizona, where excess solar can be stored in batteries, green energy has become cheaper than natural gas. It's become the cheapest form of energy we can produce, which has stunned and encouraged the energy industry. Coal is dead. Natural gas is on its way out. Green energy is here to stay. Today, furthermore, there are more jobs in solar in our country than there are in oil. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the fastest growing job in America by far, paying more than $50,000 a year, for some of you looking for a new career, is wind turbine technicians. The Bureau also predicts that during the next decade, jobs installing solar panels will far outpace growth of all other occupations. The green energy revolution is not on the way, it has arrived, proving the only thing that's no longer sustainable is the lie that protecting our environment costs jobs. So yes, these are the worst of times, and there's good reason for worry and despair, but they are also the best of times, because we are on the cusp of finally breaking through the self-spun cocoon that has trapped humanity in its larval stage forever. We are on the verge of a breakthrough, of spreading our glorious wings of justice, equality, and harmony with nature as we move closer to becoming one community, one planet, in harmony with all that is. Thank you.
Singing a great old traditional song from the Black Church, Guide My Feet.
The benediction today is by Duke T. Gray. The blessing of truth be upon us, and the power of love direct us and sustain us, and may the peace of this community preserve over going out, our coming in from this time forth until we meet again. Shalom Haverim.
Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom.